Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now let's look at the headlines, and then let's look beyond the headlines for the issues and the signs that are lurking there in the week that was. And tonight, as Joe Biden faces questions about his presidential campaign after a bad debate performance against Donald Trump, Mr. Biden gives a defiant performance at a rally in North Carolina. Kenya's President William Ruto capitulates to people power and cancels tax increases, but despite the climb down, Mr. Ruto is still tottering, and Kenya is bracing for more protests. So what lessons might there be for Nigerian politicians? And the question of River State, currently submerged in acts of unspeakable, politically motivated thuggery, where the government has identified one Josiah Prayer as the suspect in the explosion of dynamite near the premises of the presidential hotel in Port Harcourt. They allege he was hired by cronies of the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja, Nyesom Wike, to cause confusion and instigate a state of emergency, charges which they deny. But first to President Biden's first public appearance since Thursday's difficult television debate with his Republican opponent, Donald Trump. Addressing crowds of supporters in North Carolina just a couple of hours ago, Mr. Biden said America itself was at stake in November's election, calling his opponent a genuine threat to democracy. It follows his faltering, unfocused performance in the first televised U.S. presidential election debate with Mr. Trump. Take a listen.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
There are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up. I know what it took to take our economy from the depths of the pandemic to where it is today, the strongest economy in the world. I know what it'll take to bring this economy to everybody. I know what it'll take to rally the world, to stand up against Putin and defend freedom, not yield to him.
And it's a very different Joe Biden there from the one that we saw in that debate. Well, for their assessment of this and other news and issues of the week that was, I'm joined now by two commentators who are experts at scouring those headlines and unearthing everything that's both above and under the radar and inspiring us with their sometimes unexpected analysis and illuminating beacons of knowledge. And they are the journalist, political affairs commentator, and Arise News analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu, and the current affairs analyst and former commissioner in Delta State, Kenny Okolugbo. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for joining us. And let me come to the lady first. Two different Bidens that we saw there. I mean, an hour and a half, yesterday evening, here was this guy who was faltering and stuttering, and a lot of people thought, my God, he's losing his marbles. And then a couple of hours ago, this man, feisty as ever, fighting, really fighting back.
You're correct. Markedly different, arenas. Well, I think what we have to take away is that debate, I think the model of the debate in which there was not a crowd and then you were, muted immediately your time was over. So there was no energy from anybody. and then it was difficult for you to be aggressive because once it's your time, the microphone goes off. I think that might have affected him.
Well, I
and
think the key word from you is energy. There was no energy at all.
Exactly. You know, even when you look at Trump, normally he's completely unhinged. He runs, you know, has so much stamina, he's talking, he was so controlled. And so when people were saying that going into that debate, it was going to work against him, it actually played in his favor because he kept him on message, he kept him very, very much controlled, and he said what needed to be said and did not say more than that. But beyond that, I think that the biggest thing that this debate shows and reinforces at the same time is the severely limited choices that confronts Americans in this election, especially in terms of the quality of the candidates. One 78, the other 81 or 82, with, you know, debilitating flaws and failures and baggages. For people that are undecided voters, you know, for people that are moderates and young Americans, it's heart-wrenching. For Democrats, after that that debate, they were a little bit rattled, and so the talk was then, are we going to go into this election with Biden, or do we consider replacing him? And then for the Republicans, of course, they didn't get a knockout punch, but they came out fairly good at the end of the night, and you know, they had less damages, you know, to themselves with everything that happened. But all in all, each candidate is really a tough one, choices for Americans to pick from.
Well, absolutely. And coming to you, Kenny Okolugbo, what are your thoughts on that? Because, yes, as you said, I mean, there was a sort of stark contrast between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump, but a lot of people also noted that Trump made up a lot of stories, and he was fact-checked, and a lot of what he said was completely and utterly incorrect. And one of the points that Mr. Biden was making subsequently is that the issue of trust is absolutely essential.
But it wasn't only Trump that was fact-checked. If you watched what happened at the end of the debate, Biden was also fact-checked. But you know what really shocked me at that debate was Biden couldn't talk about the reproductive advantage, which is abortion. That is one thing that the Democrats have prided themselves with, and they have always used in winning elections. And when he was asked a question on abortion, he talked about the woman who was raped by a migrant, and that just threw him into Trump's hands. I'm not even looking at this other montage that you took. I felt genuinely sorry for Biden when I saw that montage. And it gave the impression that Robert Hall was quite right when he said he wasn't going to charge him because he was an old man that had poor memory of when he was even the vice president. And, you know, that shows why the Republicans in the House have been asking for the Robert Hall tape, and they've not been, they said the transcript was not what they were going to depend on. And if you look at the debate, the substance of the debate, it was Biden that was supposed to be fact-checking Trump. And the fact-check, Americans were not looking at that fact-check at that material point in time. I'm sure the statistics shows that almost 80 million people watched that debate all over the world and in America.
Well, a little over 70 million.
That's
yeah,
close to
that's
8,
a very
that's
big
close to
number.
80 million. That's a very big number.
Yeah.
And Biden took a whole week to prepare for that debate. And so by the time you get on that debate stage and you can't even express yourself on one of those very strong records that you have, inflation is at a very high percentage in America right now. It's over 25%. The border crisis, Trump always went on the border crisis, the migration crisis. He wasn't able to give, I mean, Trump obliterated Biden. But now, if you look at, but that's exactly. Did you hear what David Axelrod said? David Axelrod is an Obama
let me just
advisor.
quickly fact check and correct you. Inflation in America is not at 25%.
It's
well, you know, there's a difference between the monthly and the
we're
annual.
talking about the monthly. I'm not talking about the annual. Do you understand? On goods and services, you could check what it is.
I am checking.
It's ranging at about 25% on certain products.
Yeah, it is. It's not
and one key thing I thought he was going to use was
figure.
when Trump told him that the budget deficit was he had the highest budget deficit.
Right.
I said I was going to take it back to Trump because Trump had the highest budget deficit. But remember that the highest budget deficit for Trump was because of the COVID. But Trump ran away with that. So even though they fact-checked both of them, they said Biden lied like 9 times and Trump lied like 30 times. but at the end of the day, nobody was looking at the lies. They were looking at the performance.
Well, okay, let me bring Constance in. You were going to say something. Right?
No. Biden was about 15 times, or just over 15. Then Trump was over 30.
Right.
But I think when you watch the debate again carefully, you can see how Biden had over the years aged considerably.
Right.
From over past years ago when they had the debate previously, and you can see the cognitive decline and the physical decline. Of course, that's his age, and it's okay to be old. So the question people are asking, yes, it's okay to be old, but should you be running for president again?
Nevertheless,
But do you think
you went back. Sorry, make a point.
Do you think age has anything to do with cognitive decline? Papa Clark is 97 years old. And I think Papa Clark
depends on the individual.
Papa Clark is more cognitive
it depends on the individual.
Than 3 or 4 that are here.
It depends on the individual.
Yeah,
but you can broadly say that there is cognitive decline as you get older.
Yes.
But let me come back to you, Constance, because members of, you went back and you watched that again. So you got a better sense of how it kind of, moved ahead. Members of Mr. Biden's Democratic Party say he very clearly demonstrated that he still has a big command of the issues. They said he got better, he picked up as the debate went on, and that he has a vision for the country and what he offers versus Donald Trump. What Donald Trump offers is a stark contrast. Did that come through loud and clear for you, as some Democrats are insisting that it did?
I don't think he did. Of course, he has a command of the issues. He's been a good president, according to Democrats. But when you watch the debate, again, yes, he started off okay, according to the Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
No, he didn't start off on a strong note, but he finished on a strong note. Sometimes he was, looking blank into space as if he couldn't recognize his surroundings. Sometimes
he definitely looked spaced out.
Yes. Occasionally he was inaudible.
Yeah.
You couldn't understand what he was saying. He seemed to forget, what he, in his train of thought. So they were obviously there. On the issues, Democrats are Democrats, Republicans are Republicans. Whether you talk about the war in Ukraine, NATO, abortion for the local issues, so they're not going to change on any of those issues. So Democrats will always support President Biden, and the people who believe in President Trump will go for them. However, the problem becomes the center, the undecided voters, which is where, and also young Americans, because people are watching and saying, this is a difficult one. He hasn't convinced us from last night that he's able to carry on for the next 4 years as president.
Well, we're going to have to watch and see how he progresses through this election campaign, and whether or not he can, how he performs maybe the next time.
Well, I think what he did in North Carolina,
we have to move on.
What he did in North Carolina,
very, very briefly.
What he did in North Carolina might give him a little bit of hope among his base, that saying that they need to change him.
Yeah.
And on the issue of the inflation, it was actually it rose to 9%.
Yeah.
It was 1.4% when Trump left, but it was just as the prices of goods that I said was 20%.
So let's turn to the issue of the ranching bill and the debate going on in the National Assembly to set up, I suppose, cattle colonies across Nigeria. We had the senior advocate of Nigeria, Sebastian Hon, just a minute ago. The idea is to set up colonies cattle colonies to confine roving herders into grazing areas, so they stop encroaching on farms and having violent confrontations and all the rest of it. The history of it. He was making the argument that the bill is unconstitutional and that the National Assembly doesn't have the power to enact legislation establishing ranches. What's your assessment of the strength of his argument, briefly?
I disagree that the National Assembly does not have the...
Well, it's not a matter of disagreement.
Yes.
It's a matter of interpreting what the Constitution says.
What happened on that day, if you notice, there was a lot of robust argument. And the Senate President, in his wisdom, said, look, let us subject this bill, because it was sponsored by Titus Zam, the senator from Benue. And you know what has been the story of the herders and the farmers in Benue, and how it has affected food production. Benue used to be the food basket of Nigeria.
Yeah, but that's not the issue.
And what the Senate President said is, let us subject this bill to a public hearing. We'll have the headers, we'll have the farmers, they'll come make their contributions, and if it means amending a Land Use Act, because what the bill says is that, look, pastoralists should have ranches domiciled in their state of origin. A few of the senators kicked against it and said, look, that was a bit unconstitutional because that could restrict movement of people and that could impugn on certain areas of the Constitution. So it's not been subjected to a public hearing. I think his presentation should have been made at the public hearing.
Yeah, but he wanted to draw attention, and let me come to you, Constance. He wanted to draw attention to the fact that there were constitutional problems with that bill in its present form. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, this afternoon I was reading his what he wrote, and then I also listened in when he was talking. I think he made profound submissions, which all of us should listen to. You know, he really, went into remarkable digging into the Constitution to unpack aspects relating to the subject matter. And I think that's important. The beauty of the intense conversations or discussions we're having all across the country is that we can put our laws or constitution to test. We can test them, we can ask questions so that we do not make egregious mistakes. That we do the right thing.
You get the best form that
exactly.
you can get.
When he says that the National Assembly has no business setting up ranches, that the state governors, that is within their domain, there's a point there. It's just like setting up hotels or mandating, National Assembly to set federal government. And then the other part of it, or the other aspect of it is also, okay, you would have, according to this bill, a controller general or something, who controls the national ranches all across the country. So are we going back to a federal government kind of agency that have always been inefficient to run anything, and then you have them all over the country run by the federal government, and then you potentially have moribund projects with money down the drain again? Or is it better to push this to state government to support private businesses? Because this
but
is
it can still be supported privately.
But I think the state government must have the will.
This is a problem that needs to be solved. So there is a role for National Assembly, there is a role for federal government, but stay within the Constitution. That's what he's saying. And of course, this conversation should continue.
Okay, I've just been told we've got 3 minutes left. I think we took up a lot of time on the Biden thing, because everybody, you had your points, you had a point. But just very quickly, let's turn to Rivers State, the dramatic statement from Governor Fubara accusing supporters of the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike of attempting to bomb the presidential hotel in Port Harcourt in order to justify their call for a state of emergency. How would you unpick that development?
I think that statement was made in a hurry. He should have allowed the police to carry out their investigation. And again, one thing I must point out is that Fubara was silent when instead of setting up a commission of inquiry when when the State Assembly was bombed and it's going to be reconstructed with 19 billion naira. And so if he had set up a commission of inquiry to find out why the State Assembly was bombed, I don't think this person would have been encouraged to also try to bomb the presidential hotel.
Okay.
So the police is key in this.
Okay. Let me come to you very quickly. Do you believe that Nigerian politicians would go that far just to score political points?
Of course, we've seen that before. And I think what is going on in Rivers is indicative of the sense of entitlement of these politicians and the fact that they do not even understand their responsibilities, and adults are behaving, grown men are behaving like children. I think a lot of Nigerians think that this should stop, is pure bad behavior, and it has no place in a responsible or decent society.
Okay, let's quickly go to Kenya. William Ruto capitulating to people power, cancelling tax increases, but he is still stuttering because the people say they're going to keep protesting.
Because he made a fundamental mistake. Over 23 lives have been lost. Was that a price to pay for that financial bill? Yet you paid $2 billion. We agree you paid $2 billion of money that was owed by Kenyatta, but you were the vice president. You were part of that government. You fought yourself to power. The people supported you. They took risk. They went into the streets. They voted for you. I don't think Ruto had been fair to the same people who have put him there.
Okay, and Kenya bracing for more protests. What lessons do you think there might be there for Nigeria?
What happened in Kenya demonstrates that power resides with the people, but only if they know it and use it. I mean, initially Ruto was talking tough and saying the power of the state, your criminals is going to come down on you, but he faced an unprecedented backlash. So he backtracked. The power lies with the people, and definitely they should use it. But I don't know whether he's just backtracked in order to re-strategize and unleash again. I think there's more coming, on the story from Kenya. So we're going to be watching.
Okay. And on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. Dr. Constance Ikokwu is a journalist, political affairs commentator, and a Rise News analyst. And Kenny Okolugbo is a current affairs analyst and former commissioner in Delta State. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you.